Hello, in this video I'm going to run you through the features of React version 2. When you open up the toolbar, you'll see these buttons. The green ones are your repeater buttons. You've got linear, grid and radial. Then next to that you have the add effector button, add tracer, refresh, delete and settings. We're going to look at the repeater buttons first. So to repeat your layers, select your layer that you want to repeat and click one of the repeater buttons. We're going to go for grid first off. And you'll see that it creates a null, React repeater 1, and it duplicates your layer underneath. And the order that these layers are in are very important. It needs to stay under this repeater null. With that null selected, you can then move them around, or you can change the scale. You can change the spacing of them by changing the scale of the null. And you can also change the spacing of them with the effect that's created on the repeater null. So we can do the spacing here and here. With the grid, we can also change the honeycomb setting, like so. So that's grid. Let's choose this square and pick the linear repeater, which gives us a line, and it's similar kind of settings on here. We've got amount and spacing. We'll get to the amount and the sorting in a sec. And then for radial, we click the radial button and it gives us the repeated layers in a circle. And with radial, we've got the radius setting here, and we can also change the start and end of where you'd like the repeated layers to start. And you can also use more than one layer in your grid, line or circle. So if we wanted to use all three, we can select all three in the order that you would want them duplicated in. So we'll just go top to bottom here and we'll put them in a grid. And we get our layers repeated in a grid like so. I'm just going to undo that. And say we want more layers duplicated in the grid. There's three ways of doing it. First off, you can use this text box. So I am going to put 5 space 6 and click grid, and that's going to give us a 5x6 grid. And in the text box you can use space, or you can use X, or you can use star or dash or comma. It tells you there what you can use to separate the X and Y values. So that's the first method. That's a quick and easy way of doing it. You can also go into settings and select your default amount for linear, the amount spacing, the grid, radial, and this is handy if you're repeating grids with similar dimensions every time. You can set a default for that. Or the third way is you can come in and select your repeater null and change it up here. So perhaps we want a 3x7 grid instead. So 3x7, and it will change it automatically. If you need more or less, if you need more repeaters and there's not actually the amount of layers there to give you that amount, select it and hit refresh, and it will then update, and it will delete the layers that you don't need, and it will add layers that you do need. So perhaps you want actually 6x7. You'll see that we haven't got enough layers there to repeat that. So we select the repeater, hit refresh, and it will again then give us the amount of layers that we need. And that brings us on to the sorting options. So at the moment it's iterate. Iterate means that it goes circle, square, triangle, circle, square, triangle, and it keeps going on. So that's iterate. We can change to cluster, and with the repeater null selected, we press refresh, and it bunches each of the layers together. So all the circles together, squares together, triangles are together there. And we can also go for random, select random and hit refresh, and it gives us a random pattern. And we keep with the random selected, we can keep hitting refresh and it will give us different random patterns. And with the grids, we have rows and columns as well. So this obviously sorts it into rows and sorts it into columns. Next up, it's effectors, which is this button here. And to apply an effector, we are just going to select a property. Any keyframeable property from a layer can now be affected with an effector in React. So we're going to click on scale, and with layers that are already in a repeater, you only need to select one of the properties. You don't need to select all of the layers, then press scale, S for scale, and then select all of the scales. It does it automatically for you. So we're going to click scale and add a repeater. And you'll see it gives you two additional layers. One null, which is the effector controls, effector 1, and it reminds you which property that particular effector is changing. And then we've got a react guide, which we use for when we have a fall off shape, which I'll show you in a sec. So going on to the controls, we're going to scroll down to scale, and we are going to push this up, and that affects all of the layers. It changes it in a relative fashion, so it adds 56 onto whatever scale it is. So you can see there 156. It was at 100%, it's now at 156%. And with uniform scale unchecked, you can see it just changes it in the X dimension. Okay, so that changes that. Fairly simple, but what if we want to just affect some of the layers? Well, we can use a fall off shape. If we twirl up to the main effector effect, and we can twirl down to circle, which then gives us a fall off shape, and it only changes the layers that are within that circle. And we can change the fall off shape size by changing the null, or we can change the size here over in the effects. And we can change the shape to either circle, box, which is a square, which you can change in X and Y dimensions here with the null, or linear, which you can change like that. And if I hit W, I can rotate the linear around. Like that. If we go back to circle, we've also got this hold twirl here, and that affects the sharpness of the fall off. So if we twirl it all the way down to 0, it means that there won't be many fully on 156%. It's kind of a slow, gradual build up to 156. But if we then boost this all the way up to nearly 100, everything within this inner circle is at the maximum value. Everything outside is at the original 100% value. And you can see, because that inner circle is a lot bigger, there's going to be more layers that will reach that maximum value. And you can change the guide color. So there's a couple of defaults here. The more effectors you add, the default color changes for the strokes. You can change the thickness of the stroke. And there's also animation type and easing. So at the moment, its default is in. So everything inside the circle is at the maximum value. Let's bring this down to 50 and go to in and out. So what that will do is it starts off at the minimum and it ends up with the minimum as well. And it's in between here that it goes to the maximum. So you might find that useful. And we've also got invert, which switches the minimum and maximum. So everything inside the circle is now at the original value. Everything outside is at that 56, so 156 value. We've also got easing. You can play around with those. Default is ease in and out. We've also got linear, ease in, ease out. And we've also got custom. If you change that to custom, and twirl custom easing down, we have some properties there which you can play with. I won't get too much into that. You can play with that. So yeah, that is effectors on one property. We can also apply an effector to more than one property. So perhaps we want to do scale, and let's just choose opacity as well. So different layers, but within the same repeater. I'm going to select that and hold Control and hold Command, select both of them and hit Add Effector. And you'll see it's given me this effector null, and it's reminding me that we're applying it to opacity and scale. So now if we go in there, we've got our main effector controls at the top there, and we've got two separate effects down here, one for scale and one for opacity. So we'll do the scale like we did before. And then let's twirl down opacity so we can barely see it. And again, if we go to circle fall off, everything within that side, that circle, is now a higher scale and a lower opacity. And you can also use effectors on layers that aren't in a repeater, but you will need to select each property of each layer before you add the effector. With version 2 of React, you can apply an effector to pretty much any keyframeable effect. I'm just going to run you through some more specialist ones, such as position. So let's select position and add an effector. And we'll go down to the effector position. And we've got different modes here. We've got relative, absolute, and we've got attracts, repel. With relative absolute, we can then move our layers relative to their current position. Or we can change them to absolute. So absolute on X and Y, or take all the layers to 39 in X and 69 in Y, or let's just put 500, and then we can apply a fall off, and they will move to that position, that absolute value. With attracts repel, the default target is the effector null, and positive values push layers away, negative values attract. So when I move the fall off, you can see the layers moving towards that effector null. And new for V2, you can also multiply in the X and Y. So perhaps you want it to be stronger in the X, and perhaps you don't want it to attract at all in the Y. So when you move the effector null, it will just attract those to the left and the right, but it won't attract those to the top and bottom. There's also a special effector for rotation properties. So with rotation selected, we can apply an effector and twirl down to rotation, and with that we have relative mode and look at mode. So relative mode is fairly straightforward. If the layers aren't 3D, we can just look at the Z rotation. We can also, if we just turn all the layers into 3D, just show you that quickly, it does work in 3D as well. If we go to look at mode, again the default target is the effector null. So when we move this around, it will point to our null, and we can offset that as well if the layers aren't quite looking right. Another special effector is color, which is brand new for V2. We're going to select color and add an effector. And the default color is red. And we've got three modes: single color, HSL or hue, saturation, lightness, and multiple colors. Single color, we can change this to anything you want, and then add a fall off, and that will change from the original color, from the original setting, to this new single color. If we change it to HSL, let's just turn this off. You can change the hue and the saturation or the lightness, like so, or multiple colors. Multiple colors, tore down, we have 10 different colors here. Only the first two are selected on, but you can select up to 10 colors. Within multiple colors, we have different modes. So order, we have iterate, which it's doing right now. We can also blend. So let's just turn some of these off. So you can see from red to blue, and you can change the blend loop length. So at the moment we've got 4x4, 16, so we can change that to 16, and it blends from the blue to the red. And you can add the secondary colours, third colours, fourth colours in there as well. And then random mode, which just selects from the colours randomly. You've also got evolution as well. All of the effectors, apart from the colour effector, have these three modifiers: random, step, and sticky. I've applied an effector to rotation of these triangles or cursors. Just going to demonstrate the random rotation. So I've twirled down random, and we're just working on X values here. We're not going into 3D. I'm just going to twirl this up to, let's say, 100. And it gives each of these layers a random rotation between their current rotation, 0, and 100. And we can give them a random seed. And new for V2, we've got evolution. So what that does, it loops the randomness perfectly. So if you twirl up this first full cycle, you can see that it doesn't actually change because it's looping. So we'll keep that at 0. And twirl this, and it gives you seamless loopable evolution. You might decide that each of these loops has a bit too much going on. It's moving around too much, in which case you can bring down evolution steps to, say, 4. And then within that loop, there's fewer changes. Step multiplies this value, or whichever value you use, with the index of that layer. So each of these has an index. If I click on the first layer, you see the layer controls. This has an index of 0, and then 1, 2, all the way down to the bottom, which has an index of 24 in this particular repeater. So going back to this step value, if I start adding some values here, you can see that layer 0 does nothing because it's times it by 0. But the layer at the end, this one here, 24, gets times by 9, gets times by 10. And lastly, we have the sticky modifier, which is kind of like a rounding modifier. It rounds the values to the nearest value that you enter here. So if I go to random and say, let's put a random value of 360, and you'll see all our arrows pointing in random directions. But perhaps we just want them pointing up, down, left, and right. Well, in the sticky modifier, we can then put 90 for 90 degrees, and then it will round it to the nearest 90 degrees. So now all arrows are either pointing left, right, down, or up. New for version 2 is the Add Tracer feature. I am going to create a radial repeater, this time without anything selected. And without anything selected, it will create nulls and put them in a repeater for me. With the repeater, I'm then going to add tracer, and it gives me a new shape layer, React Tracer 1. And you can change the stroke color and the width just as you normally would for any stroke. And with React Tracer affected, you can see this new effect on there with a few options. We have close path, and we also have trim paths, which works in the same way as it usually does. It's just on that top level for you, so it's quite easy to use. And offset. We also have grid controls, and I'll show you how they work. So again, I'm just going to create a grid without anything selected. And with the repeat null selected, I'm going to add a tracer. I'm going to turn the layer controls off just for a sec. And then twirl down grid controls. default is grid. We also have snake and zigzag. Let's go back to grid and apply an effector to the position. And that's going to apply. And we will go to relative absolute, and we're going to push everything down in the Y value. And then with the fall off, let's turn back our lag controls. And you can see that the tracer updates with the nulls. So you can create some quite cool and unique effects this way. Next up, we have the refresh button, which is this one here. And if we hover over it, we can see the two ways to use the refresh button, either by refreshing the repeater or refreshing the effector. So with the repeater selected, we can see we have a 3x5 grid. Perhaps you've done all the effectors you want, you've got it set up as you need, but there's just not enough in the X amount or the Y amount. We can change that by selecting 5, 7, and you can see it not quite updated here because we haven't got enough layers. So with that repeater null selected, we then hit refresh and it gives us the layers that we need. We now have a 5x7 grid. Or perhaps we don't want it in columns, we want it in rows now. We then hit the refresh button and it puts all the layers into rows for us. The other way to use the refresh button is to update the effectors. So you might have your animation done on your effector layer. It might be looking good, but you decide to add something else to it. You can select the effector and click the refresh button. Let me show you how that works. So at the moment we've got scale on that is being affected, and perhaps we decide that actually we want to add opacity to that. So we can select opacity. Well, first of all, we select the effector, then hit Command and Control, hold that and add opacity to that. So we have the effector you want to apply it to and the property you want to apply to the effector, and you hit refresh. And then you'll see that opacity has now been added to that effector. And as well as the scale effect, we now have the opacity effect, which is now being used by the effector. React also works with text layers. The important thing to remember here is that you can't just add an effector to a text layer. It needs to be part of a repeater first. So we're going to turn this into a grid, a 4x5 grid. And at the moment it is set on letters. So if you click on the text source, you can change letters to letters excluding spaces, or words, or lines. Let's put it on letters excluding spaces. And we can bring this out a bit like that. And the good thing is that it updates as you type. And then from there you can add effectors. And change the scale of the letters. Like so. Perhaps you've got your animation set up how you like. You've got your repeated layers and you've got your effector, and perhaps you've got a couple of properties on there. You've got opacity, you've got scale, you've got maybe rotation, something else. And because there's a lot of layers, because there's a lot of expressions used with the React, perhaps your computer is starting to feel the strain and it's slowing down a bit. That's where the delete button comes in handy. So I've got this animation with the effector, just going from left to right. It's got scale and it's got opacity there. If I'm happy with my animation, I can then select the effector null or the repeater null and press the delete button. And with that, it gives you a couple of options. If you haven't got any animation set up, you can just click on current frame only and it will remove all the React effects and expressions and just bake the current keyframe. If you have got some animation, you want to process every frame. And what that does, if I click it, get it going, because it does take a little while. It goes through every layer and it removes the React effects and it removes the React expressions, and it bakes those expressions into keyframes for every layer. And with those keyframes, it's quite smart. It then removes the unnecessary ones, so it doesn't bake on every single frame. And it gives you like a condensed amount of keyframes, just the ones you really need. And it's doing this for every layer. So it does take a little while, but once it's all done, everything will be run off keyframes without expressions, and it'll be much quicker for you. And that's just finished. And if we play, it's exactly the same animation, but we've removed all the React effects and layers and expressions, and it's running really smoothly now. And that's the delete button. I just wanted to end this tutorial by showing you how to make something that looks quite complex, like this animation here, in just a matter of minutes. So I'm going to go into my fresh comp, and all I've got is a shape layer, it's a circle with a white fill and a black stroke. And I am going to create a 10 by 10 grid. I'll move that up here. And I'm going to add a tracer to it. And that tracer is going to be black as well. And I'm going to put this to the bottom of my comp. Okay, and now I'm going to add an effector. Now, from the example, you'll see that the position of the circles is changing, and also the color of the circles is changing. It's not the color of the stroke, it's the color of the fill. So we want to scroll down, and we are going to find not the stroke, but the fill color. Highlight that. And we're also going to find the position. So hold Command or Control, and then add the effector. Okay, you see it's changed it all to red, but that's fine. We just want to put a fall off shape on there. So anything that's inside there, the circle, will be changed to red at the moment, which we don't want. We're going to choose our own colors. So we're going to go to multiple colors, scroll down multiple colors, and I'm just going to select a couple of colors here. And we're going to set this to random. And we're also going to make our circle a bit bigger. We're going to make sure that third color's on as well. And for position, we're going to keep it on. Oh no, we're going to change it to attract repel. And we're going to make this attract by minus 120. And there's also a sticky modifier on there. So I'm going to change that to 40 in the X and 40 in the Y. I think that's probably a little bit too much there. Minus 100. Like so. This effector, we're just going to put it to the right-hand side of our comp. And I'm actually going to create a null in the middle, parent that to the null, and then I can just rotate the effector for a seamless loop. If we play that, that's not quite what we've got in example one, but it's pretty close. You can play with the speed and all the different properties and variables to create what you want. But I just wanted to show you how quick and easy it was to set up in just a matter of minutes. We hope you enjoy using React. Thanks for watching.